I am Praveen Srivastava, Principal Chief Conservator of Forest and Secretary, Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board. It is my privilege to be part of DLC's Global ESG Committee, Mumbai chapter, which has provided me this wonderful platform. When we talk of environment, social and governance, all these terms have huge meaning and vast domains. To focus on the theme, here I would flag issues of biodiversity, finance, and planning. Before I start, let me tell you about my background. Being a forester who managed forest wildlife for nearly 25 years, for 7 years, I handled issues related to relief and rehabilitation of people who were affected by natural disasters. More important were floods of Mumbai 2005, 2006, droughts, and then landslide. Always I was bothered, I was concerned to understand, would it be possible to really reduce the occurrence of these natural disasters? I found natural disasters were only symptoms. Malady lies deep in natural resource mismanagement. With that, my profession, which initially began with the administration of forest and wildlife, with the experience of these natural disasters, and now with managing biodiversity, was a logical culmination. Biodiversity essentially encompasses right from microbes to every plant, animal, excluding human beings. The topic I have chosen to speak on is biodiversity finance planning. It is important to understand the context as to why I am speaking on this. Bygone 2 decades have witnessed natural disasters. 90% of natural disasters have taken place during the last 10 years. 677 disasters were there in USA, 567 in China, and 257 in India. Nearly 80,000 people lost their lives, and property worth nearly 10 billion got damaged in India. Annually, there is environmental degradation to the tune of nearly 5% of GDP. It's not only India. As I am talking to you, California witnessed some of the worst drought in 2021. Water scarcity persists even today. Assessment is that 20% of the western US is going to be affected by water scarcity in a big way. And by 2050, nearly 3/4 of global population is going to be affected by water scarcity. To signal the issue of water crisis, it would not be out of place to mention that Chicago Mercantile Exchange already has recorded contracts worth $1.1 billion as I'm speaking to you. Now, the issue is, what are the options with us so far as biodiversity finance is concerned? There are 3 important players. State governments, well, can levy cess. They can also ensure that there's equivalent compensation for the ecosystem services. There's a possibility of subsidy which can be given by the state governments. But this is to the discretion of a state. As you all know, in political economy, taxing citizens always is a difficult task and a difficult option. Second viable option is there with the corporates, who have more liberty and freedom with their finances. Option is corporate social responsibility, or we may call it corporate environmental responsibility. There have been corporates who have been contributing hugely by way of CSR and CER. In India, there are big groups like Tata's, Godrej, Reliance, and ITC who have taken lead. To give you an example, ITC has planted about 12 lakh hectare with eucalyptus species. Now their paper mills are self-sufficient with the raw material. Such possibilities there with most of the corporates. Why do I say so? If a product which is sold in the market carries eco-label or green label, there is better acceptance by the consumers. Concern about green economy is certainly more in developed world as it is there in developing world. Last but not the least is the issue of social capital. In democratic governance, vote is very important. If we are able to sensitize citizens about the green issues and they vote to a party which is inclined towards the conservation of biodiversity, I think huge difference can be made to decide the leadership. Ultimately, it is the decision of political leadership that determines the destiny of a society. Therefore, there are ways and means to design the finance. Biofin is a concept which got initiated way back in 2011, at the time when COP11 took place. Now this is a global phenomenon. As I'm speaking to you, there's an assessment that $143 billion globally is spent on biodiversity conservation, whereas the expected expenditure should be $843 billion. So there's a gap of $700 billion. Each and every nation is supposed to work out at their level as to how to bridge the gap. So far as India is concerned and our Maharashtra state is concerned, I am happy to announce that our state has been selected as a pilot state to determine the gap there, and this study is to be completed during the period from 2021 to 2025. The most important issue here is that investment into ecology has to be viewed in terms of infrastructure investment. Why do I say so? There's a general perception that investment into ecology does not yield return. But the reality, which I have mentioned in terms of increasing natural disasters, especially in terms of water scarcity and drought, there's a need to review the concept of investment as such. If the investment is made by the state government to restore the ecology, the damage, the losses on account of droughts or floods or landslide can be avoided, and this reduction in loss is certainly going to result in better political dividends to the political governments also. All this ultimately is going to lead us to which direction? Globally, it is a considered conclusion that biodiversity conservation solves three problems. One, climate change. Two, health. And third is livelihood security. When I say climate change is something which has affected all the countries. No country has been spared from the adverse effect of the climate change. And when I talk of biodiversity conservation, that means conservation of not only the flora and fauna, but the conservation of the entire habitat. It is in the conservation of the biodiversity that there lies the span of the survival span of the humanity. Quality of water, quality of air, ultimately is going to determine the quality of life which I and you are going to live in days to come. Therefore, there is a need to focus on the issue of biodiversity conservation for improved health also. Here it would not be out of place to mention that in the backdrop of COVID, India, despite having much less advanced health infrastructure, fared much better vis-a-vis all developed countries. Why? The reason was India continues to have rich resource of medicinal plants, which were used by people, and such usage was economical and was without any adverse side effect. And this is the reason that despite much less advanced health infrastructure, morbidity and mortality in India was much less vis-a-vis other developed nations like, say, USA, France, Norway, or Finland. So there is an intimate relationship between the improved health status and the conservation of biodiversity. Let me also tell you that the medicinal plant-based industry, which was to the tune of nearly 3,000 crore, say in the year of 2090, is going to increase to the level of, say, 15,000 crore, say 4 or 5 years from now. Reasons are simple. These are the medicines which provide better cure, no side effects, and they are economical. And that is the reason that even multinational drug companies are trying to enter India to really capitalize on the medicinal plants. Fortunately, in Maharashtra, we have the resource database for all the districts in regard to the medicinal plants, in regard to the fact whether those species are abundant or they are rare or they are disappearing. The basic issue remains, notwithstanding what policies are there in place, how a common citizen gets connected to the whole process and how a common citizen contributes towards achieving sustainable development. I am pleased to inform that as I speak, there are 28,649 biodiversity management committees which are operational. And these committees cover each and every village and each and every municipal body of the state. It is possible for citizens to contribute through these committees. Also, it would be noteworthy to find that Maharashtra has got Maharashtra Gene Bank. Gene Bank is a standalone report in the whole country which collates biodiversity of all types, which includes crop biodiversity, horticulture biodiversity, freshwater biodiversity, marine biodiversity, grassland biodiversity, livestock biodiversity. It is a misnomer to construe biodiversity as something which is confined to forest alone. Practically it covers, and it is there on each and every square inch of the land. Problem lies that we are either not able to identify it or we are not able to relate its existence to its potential use. Henceforth, the report which we have today gives a robust document based upon which on 25th of May of 2020, state government has come up with a discrete policy. The policy has established a permanent institutionalized mechanism to manage this biodiversity conservation. Understanding is very clear. Survival of humanity is directly related to the conservation of biodiversity. The better we are able to conserve it, better will be the quality of life we are going to lead. Again, this is an institutionalized mechanism of a unique type. State government alone may not be able to cater to the huge challenge of the biodiversity conservation for a simple reason. This involves so many stakeholders. These stakeholders range from politicians, political executives like ministers, to huge bureaucracy, to media, to judiciary, to citizens, to traders, to commercial enterprises, and all have got their interest. As a board, our mandate is to conserve the existing biodiversity, and whatever species are disappearing, we need to augment them. And top of all, if any commercial enterprise is benefiting by use of these biological resources, that benefit is to be distributed with the conservers of biodiversity in a manner that distributive justice is achieved. Ultimately, in a democratic governance, people are at the core. Whatever we do, ultimately benefit must go to them. As enshrined in our Constitution, in the preamble itself, there has to be justice which should be social, economic, and political. Ideally, I feel, in the present circumstances, there is a reason to think in terms of ecological justice also. As developmental processes are likely to impinge upon the environment, policies are very clear that we must have development, but development must coexist with the environmental conservation. There are losses, but those losses are to be compensated in a way that quality of the life of the present generation remains the same vis-a-vis the life of the descendant generation. That is what is understood by sustainable development. And even though it is a huge challenge which we find before us on account of the complexity of the issue, both in terms of social complexity, political and ecological complexity, there are ways and means to solve the problem. As a citizen of the globe, it is the responsibility of each and every person to contribute in his or her way to conserve, because environment is an issue which transcends national boundary. It is a global issue. It is an issue about the survival of humanity. It is not question of one country. It is the question of the whole globe. And that is why perhaps by way of BioFin, that is Biodiversity Finance Mechanism, there has been consensus globally by the instrument of UNDP that each and every country must plan out its finances so that in days to come, the gap which has existed today in form of, say, $700 billion is bridged as soon as possible. As I conclude, I would place on record to the praiseworthy idea of the creation of DLC, which has provided a robust platform for all of us to share our ideas. No one can claim to be a repository of all the wisdom. It is the wisdom which is sprinkled on each and every nation in any form. There's a reason to share our experience. And therefore, I would exhort each and every citizen of the globe to contribute towards the biodiversity conservation in his or her way, and also may reach out to me or through DLC for ensuring a better planet to live on, because there is only one planet to live. Either it is there or it is not there. Let us contribute our bit so that by 2050, the forecast which says that 3/4 of the global population is going to be affected by severe drought and water crisis is disproved, or say proved wrong. Let us all march towards achieving that goal. Thank you, DLC, for giving me this opportunity to share my views. My best wishes to you all. Thank you.